Hey, Boomer, what's worse, a kick in the nuts or giving birth?
Ooh, good question, Jimmy. All I can tell you is I hope not to experience either anytime soon. But we will get an answer to that question in this edition of OK Boomer Potpourri. Welcome to another Potpourri, it's potpourri, no, it's potpourri edition of OK Boomer, where Jimmy Amadoofus and I share with you select pieces of prose and poetry that I've collected over the past few months from Facebook. Some are designed to make you laugh, others to tug at your heartstrings, all of them to make you think.
Yeah, and we're going to get an answer to that question posed earlier about what's more painful, giving birth or kicking nuts.
But let's start, Jimmy, with you telling us a story about the irony of life after 50 years of marriage.
Yeah, well, all right. This is what one of my buddies told me the other day. He said, after 50 years of marriage, one day I looked closely at my wife and said, 50 years ago, we had a cheap house, a junk car, slept on a sofa bed, and watched TV on a 10-inch black and white TV, but I was allowed to sleep with a hot 23-year-old woman every night. Now, we have a $500,000 house, a $45,000 car, big, beautiful bed, and a big screen TV, but I sleep with a 69-year-old woman. It seems to me that you are not keeping up with your end of the bargain. Well, my wife is a very sensible woman. She told me to find a hot 23-year-old, and she would make sure I went back to living in a cheap house, driving a junk car, sleeping on a sofa bed, watching TV on a 10-inch black and white screen. Aren't older women great? They really know how to solve an old man's problems. Okay, Boomer.
Here's a couple of short pieces on heartbreak. This first one is from Louise Erdrich from The Painted Drum. Life will break you. Nobody can protect you from that. And being alone won't either, for solitude will also break you with its yearning. You have to love. You have to feel. It is the reason you are here on earth. You have to risk your heart. You are here to be swallowed up. And when it happens that you are broken or betrayed or left or hurt or death brushes too near, let yourself sit by an apple tree and listen to the apples falling all around you in heaps, wasting their sweetness. Tell yourself that you tasted as many as you could. Next is a short bit from a book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross from her book on grief and giving. The reality is that you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You will learn to live with it. You will heal, and you will rebuild yourself around the loss you have suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same. Nor should you be the same. Nor would you want to.
Okay, Boomer.
Jimmy's going to share with you a poem by Brian Bilston, whose poems often show up in these potpourris. To set this up, I want you to envision an interview situation where the interviewee, the person being interviewed, is addressing a question near the end of the interview.
Questions? I began shifting nervously in my chair. If it's true, there is no heaven and no hell, no eternity or long hereafter, no divine plan or off-stage direction from an invisible hand, then how do we make sense of it all? How do we make our way through this life, this glorious, ridiculous, ramshackle world of ours, with its wars and brutality and conflicts and petty arguments? The 10,000 tiny acts of kindness, which happen unnoticed before breakfast, and all that love and pain, happiness and loneliness that comes to us unannounced by turns. as if we ourselves were pitched daily onto the waves of one of its vast, mysterious oceans, not knowing whether today is the day we drown, or we find ourselves washed up on some strange but friendly shore. You say after a lengthy silence, what I meant was, do you have any questions about the job? Okay, Boomer.
I did something the other day that I'm a little bit proud of. My wife and I watched an elderly man shuffle out of a restaurant. And when I say shuffle, he was barely creeping along, moving his feet just a few inches in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, moving really slowly. He had a cane, and he had a bag full of leftover food, I assume, from his meal. And I made the comment about it. The man had stopped in front of a place where he was going to step down. It was on a ramp. And I started to walk away thinking, wow. But then I turned around. And I jogged over to the old fellow, and I grabbed him gently by his elbow, and I said, "Can I help you walk to your car?" And he said, "I'd like that." He didn't know me. I didn't know him. But we spent the next few minutes. That's how long it took to get from the edge of the restaurant to his car, which was only 20 yards away. But we exchanged comments about how our meals were and how he thought the meatloaf he'd had that evening could have been a little bit better. It wasn't quite as good as his own. I wished him well, and he did me, and we went our ways. It was an act of kindness that didn't take me very long to do, and I felt good about doing it. And it's very similar to this story here. It's entitled, "A Woman Being Driven to Hospice." I arrived at the address and honked the horn. After waiting a few minutes, I honked again. Since this was going to be my last ride of my shift, I thought about just driving away. But instead, I put the car in park and walked up to the door and knocked. "Just a minute," answered a frail, elderly voice. I could hear something being dragged across the floor. After a long pause, the door opened. A small woman in her 90s stood before me. She was wearing a print dress and a pillbox hat with a veil pinned on it, like somebody out of a 1940s movie. By her side was a small nylon suitcase. The apartment looked as if no one had lived in it for years. All the furniture was covered with sheets. There were no clocks on the walls, no knickknacks or utensils on the counters. In the corner was a cardboard box filled with photos and glassware. "Would you carry my bag out to the car?" she said. I took the suitcase to the cab, then returned to assist a woman. She took my arm, and we walked slowly toward the curb. She thanked me for my kindness. "It's nothing," I told her. "I just try to treat my passengers the way I would want my mother to be treated." "Oh, you're such a good boy," she said. When we got in the cab, she gave me an address and then asked, "Could you drive through downtown?" "It's not the shortest way," I answered quickly. "Oh, I don't mind," she said. "I'm in no hurry. I'm on my way to a hospice." I looked in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were glistening. "I don't have any family left," she continued in a soft voice. "The doctor says I don't have very long." I quietly reached over and shut off the meter. "What route would you like me to take?" I asked. For the next 2 hours, we drove through the city. She showed me the building where she had once worked as an elevator operator. We drove through the neighborhood where she and her husband had lived when they were newlyweds. She had me pull up in front of a furniture warehouse that had once been a ballroom where she'd gone dancing as a girl. Sometimes she'd ask me to slow in front of a particular building or corner and would sit staring into the darkness, saying nothing. As the first hint of sun was creasing the horizon, she suddenly said, "I'm tired. Let's go now." We drove in silence to the address she had given me. It was a low building, like a small convalescent home, with a driveway that passed under a portico. 2 orderlies came out to the cab as soon as we pulled up. They were solicitous and intent, watching her every move. They must have been expecting her. I opened the trunk and took the small suitcase to the door. The woman was already seated in a wheelchair. "How much do I owe you?" she asked, reaching into her purse. "Nothing," I said. You have to make a living, she answered. There are other passengers, I responded. Almost without thinking, I bent and gave her a hug. She held on to me tightly. You gave an old woman a little moment of joy, she said. Thank you. I squeezed her hand and then walked into the dim morning light. Behind me, a door shut. It was the sound of the closing of a life. I didn't pick up any more passengers that shift. I drove aimlessly, lost in thought. For the rest of the day, I could hardly talk. What if that woman had gotten an angry driver, or one who was impatient to end his shift? What if I'd refused to take the run, or had honked once and then driven away? On a quick review, I don't think that I've done anything more important in my life. We're conditioned to think that our lives revolve around great moments. But great moments often catch us unaware, beautifully wrapped in what others may consider a small one. People may not remember exactly what you did or what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel.
Okay, Boomer.
This next piece is entitled Lawnmower Electrocution, and it's supposed to be by Gary Larson, the cartoonist who wrote The Far Side. I don't know if it actually is true or not, or even if Mr. Larson wrote it, but it is funny. Jimmy, would you like to share?
Yeah, there's nothing better than funnier than, electrocution by a lawnmower. Here we go. We have the standard 6-foot fence in the backyard. And a few months ago, I heard about burglaries increasing dramatically in the entire city. And to make sure this never happened to me, I got an electric fence and ran a single wire along the top of it. Actually, I got the biggest cattle charger Tractor Supply had, made for 26 miles of fence. I then used an 8-foot-long ground rod and drove it 7.5 feet into the ground. The ground rod is the key. The more you have in the ground, the better the fence works. One day, I'm mowing the backyard with my cheap old Walmart 6-horsepower big wheel push mower. The hot wire is broken and laying out in the yard. Now, I knew for a fact that I had already unplugged the charger. I pushed the mower around the wire, reached down to grab it, and throw it out of the way. It seemed as though I hadn't remembered to unplug it after all. Now, I'm standing there. I've got the running lawnmower in my right hand and the 1.7 gigavolt fence wire in the other hand. Now, keep in mind, the charger is about the size of a marine battery and has a picture of an upside-down cow on fire right there on the cover. Time stood still. The first thing I noticed is my pecker trying to climb up the front side of my body. My ears curled downwards, and I could feel the lawnmower ignition firing in the backside of my brain. Every time that Briggs & Stratton rolled over, I could feel the spark in my head. I was literally one with the engine. It seems as though the fence charger and that piece of shit lawnmower were fighting over who'd control my electrical impulses. Science says you cannot crap, pee, and vomit at the same time. I beg to differ. At this point, I'm about 30 minutes, maybe 2 seconds, into holding on to the fence wire. My hand is wrapped around the wire, palm down, so I can't let go. So here I am in the middle of July, 104 degrees, 80% humidity, standing in my own backyard, begging God to kill me. God did not take me that day. He left me there, covered in my own fluids, to writhe in the misery of my own stupidity that I had created. I honestly don't know how I got loose from the wire. I woke up lying on the ground hours later. The lawnmower was beside me, out of gas. It was later on in the day, and I was sunburned. There were 2 large dead grass spots where I'd been standing. Then another long, skinny dead spot where the wire had laid while I was on the ground still holding on to it. I assume I finally had a seizure, and in the resulting thrashing had somehow let go of the wire. Upon waking from my electrically induced sleep, I realized a few things. Like 3 of my teeth seem to have been melted. My left eye will not open. My right eye will not close. The lawnmower runs like a sumbitch now. Seriously, I think our little session cleared out some carbon fouling. And I could turn on the TV in the game room by farting while thinking of the number 4. And I still don't understand that. But anyhow, that day changed my life. I now have a newfound respect for things. I appreciate the little things more. Now I always triple check to make sure the fence is unplugged before I mow. Hey, let's take this opportunity right here to hear from our sponsors, okay? Brief message coming up.
Around P-Town, it's got the news that you can use. Around P-Town. AroundPtown.com, it's got the scoop with all the poop.
Ben's Barbershop, it's a place I like to stop. Whether it's to get a fancy do or just buzz off my mop, Ben's Barbershop. It's a place I like a lot, and you'd like it too if you did your do at Ben's Barbershop. That's Ben's Barbershop in Morrison, Illinois. Look 'em up on Facebook. Make an appointment. Tell 'em Jimmy on the doofus sent you.
I was surprised to find this bit from a Marlon Brando interview in which he delivers some interesting advice about dealing with life. This is what he had to say. It finally came to me from Jimmy Baldwin, who was so good at setting me straight. Happiness, he told me, is a very typical pursuit of the spoiled, who have, for the most part, had things brought to their tables, their attention, their inspection. I needed to pursue not happiness, he told me, but discernment. You understand, he said to me, the ability and the art of editing a film. You can transform a performance by what you clip or move. A stunningly bad actor or performance can be transformed by how and where you place it. It has been edited, so it is not an honest or realistic presentation of what took place. Well, we don't understand reality too well. We think that what is placed before us is real. Because we are either lazy or stupid, we don't look around for what else is out there, or within us, or within each other. So we say, this is real. But if we remove the negative friend, the toxic thought, the temptations that topple us, then a new reality appears. We get the reality we build, edit, post, print, distribute. Don't accept the evil thought, the prejudiced view, the pessimistic view of the world. Accept a role in making the world better and go out and edit it. That is what Jimmy always sought to do. Edit the world. Edit his friends. Edit himself. This was from Marlon Brando in an interview with James Grissom.
Okay, Boomer. And now we get to the all-important question, what's worse, a kick in the nuts or giving birth? Here's what one man said. I mowed the lawn today, and after doing so, I sat down and had a cold beer. The day was really quite beautiful, and the drink facilitated some deep thinking. My wife walked by and asked me what I was doing, and I said nothing. The reason I said nothing instead of saying just thinking was because then she would have asked about what. And at that point, I'd have to explain that men are deep thinkers about various topics, which would lead to other questions. Finally, I pondered an age-old question. Is giving birth more painful than getting kicked in the nuts? Women always maintain that giving birth is way more painful than a guy getting kicked in the nuts. But how could they know? Well, after another beer and some more heavy deductive thinking, I have come up with an answer to that question. Getting kicked in the nuts is more painful than having a baby. And even though I obviously couldn't really know, here is the reason for my conclusion. A year or so after giving birth, a woman will often say, "It might be nice to have another child." But you never hear a guy say, "You know, I think I'd like to have another kick in the nuts." I rest my case. Time for another beer. Then maybe a nap. Okay, Boomer.
This piece reinforces a scary thought, realization, basic fact of life that we're all alone. This is from Madeline Miller in her novel, The Song of Achilles. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of existence is that we are all destined to walk alone, even when we believe we have found someone to share the burden. There is an unbridgeable chasm between souls, a gap that no love, no friendship, no connection can ever truly cross. We are, by nature, solitary beings, trapped in the illusion of togetherness, clinging to fleeting moments of closeness that eventually fade into the vast emptiness of our own minds.
Okay, Boomer.
This next piece is a bit long. It has its humorous moments, but it also has moments of beauty intertwined with it. It's entitled Beer Angel. Beer Angel. And it's written from the Beer Angel's perspective. 10 years ago, I had this tiny old man who would come through the drive-thru at the liquor store every other day. He wouldn't even look at me. He would just hand me the money and say he wanted a 6-pack can of Natty. Now, I was at the store most of the day, and all you weirdos were like my family. I have a lot of you on my Facebook, even now, years later. So, you get it. I wanted everyone to be my homie. It made me crazy he never even acted like he knew who I was. After about a year of this, I started asking him if he wanted to hear the daily joke from one of my other regulars. He wouldn't say yes or no, but he definitely heard me butcher the joke every time. I kept telling him all I wanted out of life was to catch him smiling as he drove away. He mostly just shook his head and asked if I would stop holding his beer hostage so he could leave. I told him someday he would probably not hate me. We did this for maybe another 2 years. By now, I thought he was really tired of my crap. I still never got more than a head shake, because he stopped telling me what he wanted and would just hand me money. Then, one day, he threw something at me after I lovingly slid the hostage beer into his lap. It was a shirt, and it said Beer Angel. My life was complete. After this, we never talked about it, but I would see him smile a little every time I wore it. He started warming up to me, I felt. It only took 4 years. Every now and then, he'd hand me a stack of jokes he printed out from one of his emails. I was in. He would bring me little things here and there, he said, made him think of me, like a little figurine of a cow lifting weights, and a candle he found outside by his trash can. One time, it was a Playboy I still have on my bookshelf because he liked the girl's earrings. I never heard anyone laugh as hard as he did that day. So, about 6 years into the drive-through friendship, he asked if Purple and I would do him a favor. He handed me a debit card and a grocery list and told us we could spend $20 on ourselves if I could go to the store for him. He was on oxygen and just couldn't even make it up to the door anymore. I literally jumped for joy as soon as I shut the window. Then he asked if I could cut his hair. He came into the shop a few times, but one day he was looking shaggy. He said he didn't think he could make it to the chair unless I wanted to carry him. I told him I'd drag him all the way in on a blanket. He declined, so I told him I'd swing by after work. He greeted Violet and me, she was 3 at the time, with chocolates which had liquor in them. Again, I can still hear him cackling. The last couple of years, I'd go to his house every few weeks and bring him lottery tickets and cut his hair while he did a crossword. I genuinely enjoyed him. He He was funny without trying, and he was just awful in the best way. We would talk about our families and a lot of other weird crap. I was telling him about something my dad had said and referred to myself as Kate. And he said, "Is your name Kate? I just thought it was Butthole." I told him my family all calls me Kate. It makes me feel loved. A couple haircuts later, he hands me a check, and I walk out to the car and see he put Kate. I cried. The last time I saw him, he called me sweetheart as I walked out. I looked back at him and really looked at him, so tiny and frail. I told him I preferred Butthole. A couple weeks later, I drove to Dexter for his funeral. Only a few of his family and friends were there. I stood awkwardly off to the side, as if it was a gravesite, and I assumed everyone would think I was a freak show. I was sobbing. After the service, everyone walked over to me and said, "You must be Kate. He talked about you all the time." I've been thinking about Pete a lot lately. I haven't seen him in, it's been a year now. But Violet and I talk about him often. I sure miss him. Please be kind to people. Obnoxiously, annoyingly, insanely kind. Credit for the story goes to Katie Sawyer.
Okay, Boomer.
This next people I have included mainly because of my two daughters, both of which have rescue dogs that are a huge part of their life, so much so that it's hard for me to comprehend. But this piece here kind of explains why my daughters are so much in love with their own dog, their fur buddies, and so forth. Jimmy, you want to share this?
Yeah, I like dogs, Boomer. Dog people. A few months after my dog died, one of my best friends asked me, what was the best thing about loving your dog? I lit a cigarette I didn't plan to finish and stared at the leash still hanging by the door. It's how they make you feel alive, I said. Not in the dramatic, overblown way people like to talk about. No fireworks, no revelations. Just the small things. The sound of their paws trailing behind you. The way they press into your side when the world feels like too much. They don't ask for too much. They don't complain or hurt you in the way people do. They just show up every damn day and remind you that even in the chaos of it all, you're needed, you're important, you're enough. And when they're gone, oh, that's when you really get it. The house feels too big. The air feels too still. But you wouldn't trade it. Not a second. Because for a while, they gave you something you didn't even know you were looking for. A reason to stay grounded. To keep going. To keep searching for more. That's the best thing. They make the world bearable in the little time you share together. They make everything feel a little less cold. And I'm still grateful for that. Okay, Boomer.
This is another Brian Bilston poem. It's entitled, "This is Not the Poem I'd Hoped to Write." This is not the poem I'd hoped to write when I sat at my desk and the page was white. You see, there were other words I'd had in mind, yet this is what I leave behind. I thought it was a poem to eradicate war, one of such power it would heal all the sores of a world torn apart by conflict and schism. But it isn't. Lovers, I'd imagine, would quote from it daily. Mothers would sing it to soothe crying babies, and whole generations would be given new hope. No. I had grand aspirations. Believe me, I tried. Humanity examined, with lessons applied. But the right words escaped me. So often they do. Have these in lieu.
Okay, Boomer.
We'll finish up this potpourri with tweets that are captured by Eric Zone in the Picayune Sentinel. Google that. You can get it free like I do and enjoy these on your own. Jimmy and I will alternate.
I knocked over a plant in the kitchen, but my cat saw me, so I had to spray myself with water so I could show him that the law applies to everyone. Okay, Boomer.
If you enjoy interacting with people who have strong opinions and minimal life experiences, may I recommend Parenthood.
Okay, Boomer. You come from dust, and you will return to dust. And that's why I don't dust. Could be someone I know. Okay, Boomer.
I'd love to have children one day. 2 days, maximum.
Okay, Boomer. I hate everyone in front of me at this checkout line. Everyone behind me, they're cool. Okay, Boomer.
I love the look on people's faces as they stand freezing at the bus stop while I drive past them. It's partly why I became a bus driver.
Shut up! And kids, don't forget to be checking in with AroundPtown.com. It's got all the news that you can use. Stay hip, stay classy with AroundPtown.com. And for you fellas that want that hip and classy look, well, then you're going to want to get your butt to Ben's Barbershop chair. That's right, Ben's Barbershop. Look him up on Facebook.com. He's in Morrison. You make an appointment. You're going to love it. If you enjoyed listening to Boomer here, he'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to his podcast so you'd get notifications of when the next episode's coming up. Maybe leave a rating on a review. But yeah, go ahead and subscribe. That helps the podcast grow, and that makes the little fella feel so much better. And if you had any feedback for him, go ahead and contact him at ttaudioworks@gmail.com. Again, that's ttaudioworks@gmail.com. Okay, I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.